Hi, I'm Carol Versalino, the co-founder of Oak City Labs software development agency. And with me here today is my co-founder and the CTO of Oak City Labs, Jay Lyerly. Today, we're going to discuss the differences between native and cross-platform applications. It is a question we get asked about all the time. So hopefully we're going to give you a high level and maybe some of the pros and cons between the two differences. And before we start off, we are a native shop, so just keep that in mind. All right, Jay, I know this is one of your favorite topics. Could you please explain to viewers what we mean when we say native platform versus cross-platform?
Okay, so native means that you're using the native development language and libraries for an application. So I'm probably going to talk about iOS, but this applies to Android as well. So for iOS, that means using usually a Swift application using the native Cocoa Touch library to interact with the system. So on the other hand, you have cross-platform. Now that used to sort of mean like just a web app wrapped in a really simple wrapper, where it's really just a web page. But now that usually means more that you're using a non-native language like JavaScript or C#, and those have their own libraries. Like JavaScript would usually use something like React Native, or C# would use something like Xamarin. And that's an interface layer between your app and the system libraries.
What about some of the newer things on the market, like Flutter? Flutter's kind of the latest.
Yeah, Flutter fits that same kind of mold. It uses a language called Dash, which is Google's sort of language they came up with. And that uses like the Flutter libraries to talk to the system library. So it's still that extra layer in there to translate between the non-native language.
Okay. Well, so what are some of the benefits of using a native platform?
So with the native app, you're going to get access to everything you're ever going to get access to. It's wide open fields. Also, you've got one less layer in there. So you've got your code and you've got the system libraries. So that means less software, and less software means less bugs. So there's less to go wrong. Now, if you look at something like cross-platform, the big selling point there is always, well, there are two big selling points. One is that you get to use a different language. So you have a bunch of JavaScript experience on your team, and so you're like, oh, I can use JavaScript. Or Microsoft shops often have a lot of C# folks, so they can use Xamarin and make these cross-platform apps. And the other big selling point is the write once, run anywhere kind of thing, where you build one app and you can run that on both iOS and Android, and some other weird platform that comes up next year. So the downside with that is with the write once, run anywhere thing, it never really turns out that way. There's always first off, iOS and Android are different. Users expect them to behave differently. So you often end up with a lot of sort of bifurcated bits of your code where you have one section for iOS to do an iOS kind of thing, and you do have another section for Android to do an Android kind of thing. So you get lots of that sort of thing, really messy code, which is hard to maintain in the long run. Also, with these platforms, because again, there's that extra layer in there between your code and the system stuff. Sometimes they don't always have access to all the features, especially new things that come out, like in iOS. iOS 14 just came out a few months ago. There are features in there that might not yet be covered by some of these cross-platform libraries, or more advanced features. Like if you have an app that does really fancy camera stuff and you want to have access to advanced camera controls, they don't always cover the whole breadth of the native API.
Okay, that makes sense. And so I know Apple is kind of known for being difficult sometimes to get your app approved and in the store. Is that ever a concern with cross-platform?
Sometimes it is, because, for example, there's certain private APIs that you're not allowed to use. And sometimes those things change. And so with, again, with this extra layer, you've got this they've got to keep up with those things too. So sometimes people run into problems where their cross-platform library isn't in compliance and they need to upgrade, which means they have to do things to their code, or that upgrade's not available yet, or it's not stable, things like that. So sometimes that can be an issue.
Okay, so it sounds like pros of a native platform is you don't have a layer there and you get a whole lot more access to functionality of the hardware and the operating system for what you're developing for. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Cons, do you think maybe sometimes it's a little more expensive if you need to develop for iOS and Android?
If you're doing iOS and Android, you get, one good iOS dude and one good Android person. And they can go to town. I think a lot of the problem with like a cross-platform thing is you get one JavaScript developer and you think they're going to do everything, and they might have to, but then they have to do these platform-specific parts, which sometimes requires a little more expertise in Android and a little more expertise in iOS. So now maybe you've got one person, but now they have to sort of wear 3 different hats, and so
Okay.
they're stretched.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So, all right. So, last question, and I'm sure this is going to be your favorite one. So, when is a situation when it would be okay to use a cross-platform app or to build something with a cross-platform language? And I worded it that way because I know you don't like it.
So the biggest issue, I think, when you're looking at this thing is complexity of your app. The cross-platform frameworks make really simple apps really easy. Like, it's a great demo, it's like they can throw together a really simple thing. But the complexity of those things grow really sort of rapidly. So as your app gets more and more complicated, the complexity of the whole system grows like really, really quickly. But with a native app, there's a little more of a hump, especially if you're not a native developer, to get into that. But the level of complexity of the app doesn't grow very fast. It's actually pretty flat. So, I mean, a lot of apps, even basic, like, 1.0 version of your app, you add enough features that those complexity curves sort of cross, and the JavaScript actually becomes more complicated and you have more sort of burden to add new features than a native app. So, in my opinion, the native app, is really going to be, in the long run, is going to be easier to maintain and develop and add features to. So, if you want to do a cross-platform app, like, the only real application I can see for that is when you've got something really simple, really static. Basically, you want to take some, like a magazine app, right? You want to just make some reader that's packaged as an app you want to plop on the phone, and it's not gonna be really feature rich and not gonna be really performant.
So it sounds like maybe if you're a startup and you've got a low budget and you do, for whatever reason, you have to go cross-platform, maybe to plan ahead, a good thing would be to plan ahead for potentially rewriting a native in the future. So just know that may not be the app that you scale on, depending on the features in your app.
Yeah, if you're doing a first version for to try to like shoestring on a shoestring budget and that kind of thing, I think you're going to hit the wall pretty quickly, and you're going to have to rewrite that thing next year.
Okay. All right. Well, Jay, thank you for discussing this topic with me. I know it's one of your favorites. You did a good job not doing a full-on rant on it, but
thank you, Carol.
If anyone has any questions or would like us to explain something a little bit more, we'd be happy to do that. Just please follow along on our Oak City Labs channel, or you can find us on social media. Thank you so much for watching.